All right, everybody, this is the tools and windows video. We're going to be talking about specific tools, how they work, and ways to mess with them. We're also going to talk about some of the window tools that we're going to use, so like layers and color, plus a few others. And we're going to go through some other things like filters and adjustments, and that's it. So let's get started. Off the top, we're going to go to the toolbar on the right, and I have mine set up as the default. You guys can always customize yours if you want to reference the last video to show you how to do that. Please do. So let's start from the most commonly used ones, and there might be a few that we can learn in class, but I'm just going to show you 5 that I feel are the most important for what we're doing. Okay, so the first one is the move tool. Now the move tool does what it sounds like it does. It moves stuff on your canvas. So move tool is at the very top of the toolbar. If you click on it, you can see it hover over it, it says move tool. And if you look here, the shortcut for it is V. So if I'm in a different tool, I can very quickly hit V, and now I'm in the move tool. So what the move tool does is I can grab elements on my canvas and I can move them around. And as you can see, it's moving just the element that's on my layer that I'm currently on. We'll talk about the layer over here in a second, but it just grabs individual pieces of your work. You can also have certain elements within a layer moved independently from everything else on the layer, but we're going to use a different tool for that in conjunction with the move tool, and I'll show you in a second. So now that we know what it does, let's look at some of the options we have. If we look up here, there are a few different things that we can add to it. Auto select means that if you click somewhere, if you have it on, if you click somewhere on your canvas, for instance, as you can see on here, I have the 2 layers. I have my background, and then I have the characters that I've thumbnailed on the second layer. I know this is layer 1, but this is the second layer that I have. If I click on the characters, right, I'm on that layer. But if I click on the background, you can see that I've switched over to the background layer. And so what this means is that I can automatically choose something and then move it around based on just where I click on the canvas. And that's it. So this is really nice because I can very quickly change things. I can really quickly move elements and arrange my composition in a way that makes more sense to me. But it's also a pain in the butt when you're just trying to move an entire layer. So this is something you can check on and off quite frequently. So if I make sure I'm on my background layer, and let's say I grab this night and I kind of move, it's only going to move the background layer. It's not going to move the night. Okay. Same with the nights. If I want to move the nights or move the background layer, but I click while I have just that layer selected, it's only going to move them. So keep that in mind. If you're having a hard time moving something, double check that you have the auto select on or off, and make sure you're using it appropriately for what you're doing. You can also have layers and layer groups. So you can group layers together, and if you have it set to group, it's going to move all of the layers within a group. And we'll talk about grouping in just a moment. Over here is more for aligning options. So let's say I have different elements on different layers. Let's see. Oh, that's fine. Okay. If I hold these 2 together, go back to the move. Yeah, you'll be able to select different parts and align them appropriately to what you're doing. So if you look here, I have like the nights. Let me transform these real quick and make them a little smaller. I'll talk about transform in just a minute. We're having these 2 pieces. They kind of look like separate elements, right? Auto select on, so I can grab these things. If I have both of these layers selected, which I'll show you how to do that in a second, then you can align them in a way that has them mathematically centered on each other. So if you're trying to get something to look really correct and really smooth, you can do that. But you have to make sure you have multiple things selected in the layers side. Okay, so you can align them vertically, you can align them horizontally, you can align them to an edge so that they are sharing the same frame edge. So if you look over here on the thumbnail, you see the bottom of the feet of this knight are touching the frame and the bottom of this smudge is touching the frame. It's using the bottom of that frame as your alignment tool. And if you look, they're pretty much aligned. Okay. Now, let's say you've done something and you want to undo it. You can Control Z and it'll undo everything in steps. And it goes pretty far back. It's got a long memory, but it doesn't have an infinite memory. So it's not like if you've used Procreate. Procreate remembers pretty much every stroke that you've made on the canvas. This does not.
So you have to set that up in the preferences to do that, and that's going to be on history. And I'll show you history in just a second too. So that was the move tool. We're going to go on to the lasso tool and the marquee tool. They're in conjunction, used often for the same purposes. So the marquee tool is it's kind of like it's a selecting tool. So what you can do is you can select something to a shape. So right now I am selecting something in the shape of a rectangle. So if I go like this and I select these two knights right here, you can see that I have this nice little frame of, we call them the marching ants in the field. They're moving around showing you like I've got these parts selected. Now you can take this, and if you use the move tool, you can grab these guys and move them independently. And you can see it's also selected just the pixels that are on that frame. And then you can put them wherever you want to, where you feel appropriate. So now I've selected something, but I can't undo the selecting. Like, how do I get out of the selecting? It's just going to constantly try to select stuff. So what you can do is if you selected something and you want to like not have it selected anymore, you can hit Control D and you can deselect stuff. So I've got this guy selected, I've moved him, and then I'm done. I want to leave him there. I don't want to have to click anywhere. You can also hit deselect here on the contextual menu, and it does the same thing. Or you can just use the hotkey Control D. Okay, I'm going to Control Z and bring these guys right back to where they were. All right, within the lasso tool, or the marquee tool, there's also different shapes you can go with too. So you have the elliptical marquee tool, single row marquee tool, and the single column marquee tool. While you're doing these shapes, this goes for all of them. We'll demonstrate with the elliptical so that you can just see. So while you're selecting something, so like if I have this, it's going to be not in perfect ratio. It's elliptical because it's not a circle, but it's not an oval. It's kind of everything. So yeah, I can make a little oval, and then I can select parts and I can move them like that. But I want a like perfect circle. So let's say I want to take a perfect circle out of this guy's shoulder. I can go back up to here. The hotkey for this, even though it's an elliptical, is M. So I can hit M, and I'm trying to get this perfect circle figured out, and it's not working. So if you hold Shift while you're doing this, it'll create a perfect circle for you. Okay, and then if you hold space while you're holding Shift, you'll be able to move your selection around. So I can get it right where I want it to be. Okay, and then I can do something like I can hit delete, and it'll cut out pixels for me, and I can get really fun, interesting shapes. Okay, so let's say like I want, maybe like an insignia right here in the middle of this guy's chest. Perfect circle, boom. All right, that was the lasso, or the marquee tool. The lasso tool is the same thing, but it's just free form, and it does literally the exact same selections, but you can draw out your selection rather than relying on a shape. All right, you got to remember though that when you start, as you're doing something, when you let go, Photoshop's going to want to close this and make it a shape. So if I let go, it's going to create a line for me and close those off. So when I make a selection, this is really important because this is something that you can often use. If I make a selection, like let's say I want to go from here and I want to get rid of this little fuzz right here in this little guy's sleeve here, I want to make sure it's all nice and clean. And if I do something like this and I go inside, I want to kind of cut a piece out. If I let go, it's going to select areas that I don't want. You can see I have this little section here. Now, also you can see the selection's missing some parts. I want this to really be flush and kind of follow the same form, and I'm also hitting stuff that I don't want. So this looks like it's a little messy, right? But we can go in now, and we can add to this selection, and we can subtract to the selection. So let's subtract first, because that's pretty much what you're going to be using the most for. So if I am on the lasso tool, if I hold Alt, and I draw into a shape that I'm asking for, what it's going to do is it's going to take it out of the selection that I currently have. And it's going to act the same way that the last one did, where I need it to be closed. It needs to be a closed shape for it to make one. If I do something like this, I make a straight line, it's going to be doing what I ask it to do, but it's also not going to work the way I want it to. See that? So I want a specific shape. You're going to draw it, and then you can close it off. Now I want to add to this too. Let's actually get rid of this part. See how I come back? I generally like to bring my lasso right back to where I started and then let go, so it's very precise. So now I want to add to this too, okay? So to add, you can hold shift. If I hold shift and I draw inside of it and I go out and then let go inside of the selection, it's gonna add to the selection. So I can do stuff like this. I can start, make a big old loop, and then go back into the selection and let go, and now I've had this added. I'm like, oh, that was dumb, I didn't want to do that. I can hit Alt, cut it out, and then bring it back. Okay. Now let's say like you accidentally mess up and you click outside and you lose all that, and that doesn't seem like a big deal, but when we do selections for like photo bashing or something, you can have very, very, very detailed photos that you're selecting with lots of different bits that you're trying to take off or add or delete, and you can just make one misclick and lose everything. To bring it back, all you have to do is hit Control Z and it'll bring your selection back. Okay. And then once I have the selection, I can go ahead and like delete the pixels, or I can do something like this, and we'll talk about the brush tool in a little bit. I can paint inside of it too. Oh, doing that. All right, check it out. So this is practical for, let's say I have like one of these, this first guy, we're gonna stay with him. I wanna start drawing some like sub parts of his armor on. I can do this. I can go ahead and grab some shapes, and then I can start really quickly painting. Oh, that's a little too bright. I don't like this bar. I'm gonna get rid of mine. So if you guys wanna get rid of this bar, I'm gonna go to Window. I'm gonna take the contextual taskbar off because it gets in my way. All right, and so I can just kind of really quickly build some sub shapes in here, make some really unique but very sharp designs, and so I don't have to rely on my brush skills. I can just define them really fast. Define the shape like drawing, and then I can fill it in with the color. And this is a really great, fun way to work. It's very, very precise, very fast, and clean. Clean is like a big deal when it comes to design work. All right, so that's just a fun way to work, and it looks pretty good. So that's the Marquee tool and the Lasso tool. The next one is the brush tool. This is their big one. This is our heavy hitter, our like meat and potatoes, our daily driver. Like the brush tool is one of the biggest tools in Photoshop, and I think if you're going to be in the entertainment design field or do anything entertainment design wise, having the brush tool mastered is very important. So we're going to talk a lot about it real quick. So brush tool here is just like all the other tools. It's got different subtools. So we got brush tool, pencil tool, color replacement tool, mixer brush tool. I only really use the mixer brush tool and the brush tool. I don't really use these. They don't do anything too important to our process. So I'm just gonna have the brush tool. And the brush tool works by, I'm moving this over here, works by having a stamp. So I'm gonna click and it creates a stamp. So this is a shape that is being defined by Photoshop. Okay, so we'll go into like brush settings and stuff like that on another video. This one's getting a little long, but essentially brushes make a shape and they restamp that shape a lot. So you can see it going right now, how it's making little stamps, tons and tons and tons of them. And if you set this up, you can actually make something look really close to a brush stroke. And there's all kinds of different brushes that do that. Okay. These are all little stamps with a bunch of different textures inside of them, things like that. You guys watched me just open up a menu to bring up the brush, like different brushes and stuff. The way to do that is by right-clicking, and it'll bring up a brush menu. Or you guys can go to a window, go to brushes, and you can have your brushes up on your screen with you at all times. So you can just really easily and quickly, it might not, yes, there we go. Really quickly and easily have all of your brushes ready so you don't have to find them all. Okay, so yeah, this is the brush menu. This is where all of your brushes are going to be. You can have each one shown individually where you can see the brush stroke and the name. You can have it set up in a little folder, and you can close the folders because as you can see, you can get quite a few brushes at one time. And there's a lot. you don't need this many brushes. This is just so much. I think most professionals really use 4 or 5 brushes like 95% of the time, and everything else is just a fun extra brush. And so this is, I just have a bunch of brushes here that I'm experimenting with, playing with. I like using new brushes to try out. But so I have my standard set up here, and if you go through and we start looking, so you only have something that looks a little like a watercolor brush. You have something that's more like a pen. We can have some stuff that's got texture, so it looks like you're using like a texture brush. And the most important thing about brushes, and why we're using tablet, like Wacom tablets, is because of the brush's ability to be opaque or be hard. And so if I very softly press this brush, you can see it's very, very light. But if I push harder, I'm getting nice, heavy, thick, opaque tone. Okay? So having that softness is really important. And having a tool to help you do that is very important. Some brushes don't use that. They use just a size modifier. So if I very lightly press, this is a very small shape. And if I push hard, it goes to the full size of the icon that I have for this brush. All right, so those are the brushes. Brush settings, if we go over to the brush settings panel, you can see there's a lot of different brushes that I have here. You guys will probably not have all that stuff. These are all the alphas. These are the icons that make those stamps. And so each one is a different shape. So you can click on one and have a different start. And you can see as we click, it's going to change a few things. And we definitely have a little preview on the bottom of what the stroke would look like. So let's say we'll click let's click this funky shape right here. Or we'll do something more reasonable. We'll click this shape. This is a good shape. So we've got a really cool looking, and this is all live too. As you're adjusting stuff, you can, check it out up on your canvas and see if you like it. So this is what it looks like here. We can change the spacing so that the stamps are further apart or closer apart. If they're closer apart, it's almost seamless. It's almost like there's no space between them at all. Okay. You can change the angle that stamp is in there, so it looks different. Okay. You can squash the stamp, so you can see these 2 circles here. If you push them closer together, see how it says roundness? You can get it flatter. I like to use this for like certain textures that make it look like a ground, and I can draw left and right and have like a really nice floor pattern. You can change the size this way, so you can get nice and small, or you can get it massive. All right, and then over here, these are where like the big brush settings are. So the first one is shape dynamics. That's just saying when you put pressure onto it, it's going to change the size, and you can see it's being controlled, size jitter, controlled by pen pressure. So if I go, this is jitter. Jitter means that it's going to change. So if I bring the jitter up as I'm pushing, uh-oh, what's going on here? Uh-oh, I think I broke it. Oops. Okay, well, size jitter. I think I broke it. It's crashing. I'm gonna have to pause this. I'll be right back.